Okay, we're going to get started with our Chapter 5 for AgEcon. Up till now, a lot of what we've been doing has just kind of been going through the different terminology and simple concepts related to agricultural economics at the micro level. What we're going to take a look at in this section is going to be a lot more in terms of the impact that certain aspects of our market might have on the pricing and the quantity demanded for different commodities. So as we go through here, we're going to find there's going to be a lot more intensive in terms of understanding the big concepts, understanding how formulas are used, why they're used, and then those impacts that they might have as we go along. So feel free to watch this over and over. I'm going to try to break it down into sections and include those in each of the different sections in on the content page in Canvas. That way you can, they're shorter videos, but you can go back and see how they apply in those given areas. So let's go ahead and get started. Measurement and interpretation of elasticity. So we've talked before about elasticity, and that has to do with how much a product's consumption might change based on its price, and how quickly that occurs. So how much of a slight change in price has to do with the quantity that is going to be consumed, and vice versa, the amount consumed versus how that impacts price. So we're going to talk about own price elasticity of demand. We do have a coefficient for that. We're also going to take a look at what's called income elasticity of demand, which has to do with a change in individuals' income and how it impacts the quantity of a product that's going to be demanded. We're going to also look at cross price elasticity. So we're going to look at certain commodities or certain products that have a connection to other products, and what is that connection? How does the sale of one impact the sale of others? And then eventually we're going to finish up talking about kind of how those different concepts are going to work within those, how they influence those three types of elasticity. Excuse me. Another objective that we have here is we're going to look at short run versus long run models, and things that occur in the short run. I guess my best way to explain this a lot of times has to do with our concept of climate change, the difference between climate versus weather. So weather is a short run attempt and a short run factor. And when we look at the short run from weather as an example, we could be looking at years, we could be seasons, we could be looking at years, we could be looking at decades, even centuries where we've seen changes. As we get into long run examples, now we're looking at multiple centuries, a longer period of time. So weather changes abruptly in the short run. We have warm years, we have wet years, we have dry years, we have cold years. But in the long run, that's where we're really looking at from a climate change. So in the long run model of models in ag economics, we see things to be a lot more smooth in terms of their changes. In the short run, we see a little bit more erratic. Then finally, we're going to look at those implications that elasticity, demand elasticity has in terms of the food and fiber system and where that fits. So let's get started. These are some key concepts covered. I would make sure that you guys are writing down, taking a separate set of notes. Just don't just sit there and watch this video and think that you're going to mentally digest all of this. You're going to have to do a lot of working with it, and I'll have some sample problems for you guys to work on. So the first one is own price elasticity. So when we look at that concept, we're going to say that the percent change, and that delta right there, that little triangle, is the percent change in the quantity of a product. In this case, we're going to use beef as an example. So the percent change in the quantity demanded of beef, that's going to change based on the percent change in price of beef. As price goes up, how much is consumption going to decrease? As price goes down, how much is it going to increase. So that's own price elasticity. So it's the price elasticity for that individual product. Income elasticity, we're looking at the same formula. All we're going to do is we're going to substitute that second portion in terms of price, and we're going to use income as the factor. So the percent change in the quantity of beef for a given percent change in the quantity of income. Cross price elasticity is when we're looking at two different goods. So in this case, we're using the same formula. We're just now looking at the quantity of beef compared to the price of chicken. If chicken gets less expensive, how much more beef are we going to consume? How much less beef are we going to consume? If the price of chicken goes up, what is that? What is going to happen to the quantity of beef that's going to be consumed? Now we have a couple different, actually 3 different ways that we can take a look at elasticity. One of which is flexibility. I'm going to go ahead and put in a couple things here just to kind of get you guys along the ideas that we're working with. So I'm going to draw a box, and when I draw this little box over here, I'm going to say that it is representative of a graph. Okay, so we have the x-axis along the bottom, we have the y-axis along the vertical. As we're going through and we take a look at those things, we need to say, okay, well, we need to see what a demand curve looks like. So we're going to just draw a demand curve. We know that a demand curve is downward diagonally, okay? And that downward diagonal demand curve is saying that as this axis is increased, this axis is decreased. So we would just draw a connection between those two, and earlier we talked about it being at an equilibrium, right? So I'm going to draw another little box in here and say that this is the price of a product, and this is the quantity of that product based on our demand curve. And where those two come together, this point right here would be our equilibrium. They're willing to pay this much price for that much of the product. If we change the price, we know that it's going to impact the quantity that is going to be demanded. So with that, we'll draw another box. And this, again, is going to be a different representation of a price. So let's say that the price goes up of whatever the commodity is that we are consuming. We match that with the, let's see if I can change that to this here. Okay, we match that with the quantity that would be consumed. So you can see that at this price, we had this quantity. But when we increase the price, we had a decrease in quantity. Okay, and the angle of this is going to have an impact on, well, how much is that going to change? So now that I change the angle and it no longer lines up, we can say that, well, this original one would have to fall into that. And the difference between these two, I'm going to make this a little bit more, actually, I'm not going to mess with that. I'll just do this. When we take a look at the difference between the two, we're going to say, well, how much did we give up here versus how much did we gain here? And that is going to have to do with the slope, and we're going to calculate slope. So remember, slope is rise over run. So how much did it rise and how much decrease did it run? Okay, we'll get into those more specifically. Income elasticity, though, back up. And when we say arc elasticity, we're actually talking about the difference between this point and this point. That's an arc. Okay, so from this change, from that original purchase to this change, how much does that really change? So that's our arc elasticity. Point elasticity would mean that at a given point, what is the elasticity? So if I get rid of this guy and I'm just saying that this is our current supply and demand at a given price, how much are they willing to consume? That point right there where it matches up to the slope is going to be our point elasticity. What is this elasticity at that point? And then we're going to look at price flexibility, and price flexibility is going to be just the reciprocal of whatever that own price elasticity is. So all we're going to do is divide 1 divided by whatever the elasticity, own price elasticity is, and that's going to come up with that. We're going to go a lot more in depth with that as well.